Welcome back to Askewed Reviews, and today we continue the Indiana Jones franchise with the 1989 action adventure Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Here is your trivia question for today. What are the three trials of the Holy Grail? The answer will be at the end of this video. So for this third film, we start in the past back in 1912 in Utah. We get to meet a much younger Indiana Jones who has stumbled upon a group of people that seem to be trying to steal some sort of artifact or treasure. So, of course, Indiana decides to steal it instead, and now the group is after him. In the end, the artifact is taken from him, but he at least gets to live. Now we flash forward to 1938 on the Portuguese coast, where Indiana is still after the Cross of Coronado, but he does manage to retrieve it and bring it back to the States. Now, while back in America, we meet Walter Donovan, who notifies Indiana that the Nazis are apparently after the Holy Grail. What's making matters worse is apparently Indiana's own father is somehow involved. Marcus Brody, who is one of Indiana's oldest and dearest colleagues, is willing to come on the journey as well to try to find Indiana's father and the Holy Grail. Now, the two of them head off to Venice, where they meet Elsa Schneider, who is apparently working along with Indiana's father, Henry Jones. Then we find some secret catacombs, and apparently a secret brotherhood that is protecting the Holy Grail. Then our group heads off to Austria, where we get some unfortunate, crap, that person's working with the Nazis twice. On a brighter note, though, Indiana finally runs into his father, Henry. And of course, that happy reunion does not last for long, as everything ends up on fire. But the Jones boys do manage to escape and make their way to Germany to try and get Henry's journal. In the process, they end up also getting Hitler's autograph by mistake. And then, of course, after Germany, they make their way to Turkey, where they meet up with their old friend Sala, and now it's everyone off to the races to go through this temple and try to find the Holy Grail. And by the way, when I say off to the races, goodness gracious, I think almost every single type of vehicle chase possible is shown throughout this entire film. Now, of course, the team of Steven Spielberg and George Lucas do come back together to make the third film in this trilogy. George Lucas's original idea for the third film was to have Indiana in a haunted mansion. Spielberg did not want to do this as he already did the movie Poltergeist. When they both finally settled on the movie they wanted to make, Lucas was the one who came up with the idea of using the Holy Grail, and Spielberg was the one who wanted to do a father-son dynamic. Spielberg has apparently stated that The Last Crusade was his favorite Indiana Jones film to make, which is good because apparently he turned down directing Big and Rain Man to do this film. River Phoenix, who appeared in this film, did such a great job playing a young Indiana Jones. Apparently, Harrison Ford suggested him as they had worked together in the movie The Mosquito Coast. I love how, in a matter of just one day in young Indiana Jones's life, we find out why he wears the fedora, why he loves using whips, why he hates snakes, and apparently where he got that scar on his chin. Now, in real life, Harrison Ford actually got that scar from a car accident when he was in his 20s. Also, when it comes to the snakes in that train scene, apparently there were several thousand snakes used in that. Something that I just find highly amusing is apparently Bradley Gregg always plays a character that wants to beat up River Phoenix if they're in a movie together. It happened in The Explorers, it happened in Stand By Me, and of course it happened in this film. Apparently, River Phoenix did such a good job in this movie that it inspired George Lucas to create the Young Indiana Jones television series. River was asked if he'd be willing to play the character, but didn't want to return to TV, so they ended up giving it to Sean Patrick Flanery. My favorite piece of trivia involving the beginning of this film is related to this character right here, played by Richard Young. In the credits, he's called Fedora, but in the original script, he was known as Abner Ravenwood, which you may recognize the name from Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls, as Abner is actually Marion Ravenwood's father. And boy, would that make so much sense if this were actually true. Sean Connery was Spielberg's first and only choice for the character of Henry Jones. The reason for this is he has always wanted to make a James Bond film, and the fact that he could actually have the original James Bond in this movie made him so happy. Allison Doody plays Elsa Schneider in this film, but the role almost went to Amanda Redman or Gudrun Landgren. Julian Glover plays Walter Donovan in the film. And what's interesting is, you may or may not have heard that around the time when he first shows up, you can hear the Imperial March playing on a piano. Now, what's interesting is not only was Donovan the true villain in this film, but he was also in the movie The Empire Strikes Back. Additionally, with Julian Glover being the one to shoot Sean Connery with a Walther PPK, this is very funny, as of course, Sean Connery played James Bond and that was his gun of choice. And Julian Glover actually played a villain in the Bond movie For Your Eyes Only. Michael Byrne did such a great job as the villainous Vogel in this movie, but did you know he was also a true villain in the Harry Potter series as the original actor to play Grindelwald? Robert Edison is the Grail Knight for the film, but they originally offered the role to Laurence Olivier. He had to turn it down though, as he was very ill at the time, and unfortunately, he even passed away soon after. Pat Roach, who plays a thug in pretty much almost every Indiana Jones movie, did his final appearance in this film as a Gestapo thug. Unfortunately, he originally had a much bigger scene, but most of it got cut before the film was finalized. As I mentioned in a previous video, Kevork Malikian and Michael Sheard were both auditioning for the roles of Sala and Tot in the first Raiders of the Lost Ark film. Both of them did not get those roles, but they both came back in this film. For this sequence, where all the Nazis are saluting, Steven Spielberg had all of the actors put their arms behind their back and cross their fingers so it wouldn't really mean it. Also, for all you book lovers out there, don't worry, during the book burning scene, those were actually all cut up London phone books with painted covers. While shooting in Venice on the Grand Canal, they actually had complete control over the canal from 7 a.m. until 1 p.m. for one day. They actually bred 2,000 rats for the catacomb scenes, mainly due to the fact that ordinary rats probably would have carried diseases. For the seagull scene, they did not actually use seagulls as they refused to work with the film crew. They, however, did use a mixture of doves and pigeons. In the sequence where Indiana Jones says, "Fly yes, land no," is a reference to the plane crash from the Temple of Doom, and it's interesting because Harrison Ford is actually an accomplished pilot. Now, the reason why young Indiana Jones appears as being in the Boy Scouts is it's an homage from both Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford, as they both were in it when they were kids. And of course, as we find out in this film, Indiana's real name is Henry Jones Jr., and he named himself after their dog named Indiana. There is also a nice little reference to the Ark of the Covenant, as you can see a pictogram of it on the wall of the catacombs. So when it comes to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, I do really enjoy this film. I don't think it's as good as Raiders, but it's definitely better than Temple of Doom. So I'm going to give this film a 4 out of 5. Oh, one other thing of information for you. Did you happen to know that this film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, is the only of all 5 Indiana Jones movies to not have the word "of" in its title? Now, as for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode, what are the 3 trials of the Holy Grail? The first trial is the Breath of God, where Indiana realizes that he has to kneel to get out of the way of the spinning discs. The second trial is the Word of God, where apparently he has to spell out the name Jehovah in the original Latin. And the last one is the Path of God, where he has to take a leap of faith and walk across an almost invisible bridge to the other side. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there is a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments. And as always, like, comment, share, and subscribe.